Have you ever noticed how the stars are so dim nowadays, right? And no, I'm not talking about the stars up there in the sky. I'm talking about the stars that, people have kind of theoretically known on television, right? On the news, on Hollywood, or whatever, right? All these mainstream media so-called stars, right? These actors of society. Because, well, ultimately they are acting different, performance acts, right? They are singers, they are actors, whatever. And funnily speaking, isn't it funny that this society gives so great awards? Well, ultimately they're nothing, but they give so great awards to people who are acting, right? But they seem to be pulling discernment down. Seem to be, society seems to be mistreating, those who are, or better said, ignoring those who are kind of, thinking for their own selves. Because ultimately, what mainstream means, not necessarily regarding this society, what the mainstream is, it's something general, right? Something which is a foundation, right? Something principle, which is, let's say, the engine of other aspects of a certain machine, let's say. But probably these are not the best words, but a mainstream is basically the most important aspect, which keeps so many things connected, right? It is the nexus, right? The connector in between so many points. Now, a mainstream can be something good, like social media can connect a lot of people, but it can also be used in hideous ways, especially if they're aimed at, people's impulses, right? Because mainstream is always about impulses, right? On the first hand, you have you have the news, and the news flash, right? They always use these things, right? It's flashing news, it's breaking news, right? They always use the colors yellow, orange, right, and red, which naturally they are colors for danger, right? So they're kind of programming you to understand that whatever comes is a sense of danger, right? They're putting you in the right state of mind, which is danger, so that when you receive the news, right, you're more perceptive to those, and you're more likely to take those things as, the reality as it is. Because, people are waking up at an alarming state nowadays, which is the best thing ever, right? Ultimately, the point is people are waking up and they're realizing the fact that, the news aren't telling the truth. Because if you have corporations that control the news, well, you also have information that is controlled, right? Because why not? We live in a world so fake that the truth actually scares people. So you have so many things, censoring and the such, because the mainstream has to be preserved, right? And then you also have the mainstream movies, the mainstream music and the such. These aren't necessarily promoting lies, because what they're promoting is they're promoting reality as we in our ignorance have allowed it to become, right? And this is kind of problematic in a way, because it's called mainstream, right? So many people are still connected to it because they are kind of living this sleep, right? They are still in the sleep, right? They are still in the comfort zone of the so-called matrix, right? Now, the point about this is, well, nowadays, don't you see that these stars that, people worship, and, what does worship mean? Well, worship means giving all your energy, right? Giving all your attention. And where attention goes, energy flows, right? So if you give all your attention to external sources, you're basically a battery, right? Because what does a battery do? It gives all its attention to serve a certain machine, right? You put batteries, 1, 2, 3, depending on how many are needed, into a machine, right? In order to fuel that machine. And what happens to the batteries when they are depleted, right? They are thrown away. It's the same thing that kind of happens to you, right? As long as you focus yourself on society, you're a good battery, right? But when you're choosing to live, on your own discernments, you're, Covidiot, or someone who, is a conspirational theorist or something like that, Because conspirational theorists right, is a term coined by society in order to prevent people from telling the truth and to allow the ignorant people to simply police the other folks, because it is not a matter of sin, the one who, you know, accepts norms. The problem is, the biggest problem and sin is when such people who accept norms police other people and enforce them upon the others, and worst of all cases on their children, because they are the most unknowledgeable and also they are the most defenseless, right? When children come here, they are not knowledgeable of the ways, you know, things function in society. Gosh, nature is so beautiful today. So yes, haven't you seen? It seems that, you know, the sky nowadays, you know, speaking about the Hollywood skies, it's kind of dim, right? The stars aren't bright, right? They aren't shining as much. You don't see as much about them, right? It's been a pandemic, a pandemic for a year, and, you know, they don't seem to have said anything for a certain specific time, and then as if a switch was triggered, right, just like in video games, they finally said, hey, you know what, we're gonna show our concerts, right, but, you know, there is a price if you want to attend them, right? So the point is, now they are just further propagandas, right, of society to, you know, push its own agendas. So the point is, this society works in a very drugging manner, right? It drugs you with all sorts of distractions, because ultimately people are afraid of the nothingness of who they are, and then the point is, as they are afraid of that, they will run away from it. So what better ways of keeping people away from who they are other than, you know, constantly distracting them and teaching them at the same time to accept lies, to accept defeat, to accept all sorts of ideas that are far away from their own truths, right? So the point is, when you have people performing in such a way, of course there will be a lot of suffering. When there is a lot of suffering, right, there is this vicious cycle. You want to escape from that suffering, so you will concur to even more distraction, right, which will lead to more suffering and, well, so on and so forth. Now, the point is, the more you do that, the more suffering you will inflict upon yourself, and the more you will want to run away from that suffering. So the point is, in this society, you are being drugged with all sorts of things, you know, lies, deceits, and of course, music, movies, you know, so many people are stuck in this, right? They all want to see all the latest movie series, they all want to hear the latest news in music, right? The trends, the stars and whatever they're doing, you know, their personal lives, but they don't seem to care much about their own life, right? Because ultimately, no one ever asks themselves if those you know, starlets actually care about them, right? They don't care about themselves. They just signed a deal, and, well, just by the night, they are with or without a true talent, right? They are just there who they are, right? They are just someone who, well, signed a contract and they have to do what they are told, right? They can't perform otherwise because, well, they can't. You sign a deal, well, that's kind of, you know, living with the devil. So what they are doing is they are nothing else than batteries themselves, because they are fueling the system. Psychologically, mentally, emotionally. All they have to do is create music for people to enjoy, right? So they are the big batteries, right, that are holding the machine, which is attracting the, you know, the mainstream people, those who are connected to the mainstream. And this way, as it happens, right, the ones who are connected to the mainstream will be the small batteries, but, you know, the numerous ones, because being connected to that is technically you are being farmed of your energy. Haven't you noticed that when you pay attention to things that you like or you don't like, right, you always seem a bit tired after those, right? If you do something that you truly like, well, it's like you can do that endlessly, right? But when you listen to mainstream music, it gives you a great sensation of ease, right, because you're being distracted. But the point is, you're not realizing one thing. Your energy is being depleted, and then you feel bad because you have been ignoring your chores, right? And at the same time, you have been farmed by this idea, right? By this distraction. So this is how society works, right? So ultimately, you are being drugged with all these things, right? Music, movies, and the such. And now, if you want to see the concerts of these starlets that have most people drugged, well, you know, you know what you have to do, right? There's a price to be done, right? You can't travel nowadays, and you can't attend much because, well, these propagandas are still accepted by people. But guess what? Society has fallen long since, and the truth is coming out on all fronts, right? This whole idea of a pandemic is just falling apart because it is, well, it has gone beyond its expiry date, right? People are waking up, people are embracing unity. So there is no more use in embracing lies. You're only going to extend your misery, as well as the time you will need to cure from those miseries, right? So ultimately said, the point about life is just live life without these distractions. You don't need them because, you know, the mainstream media function exactly like drug dealers. They sell you drugs, they're cheap initially, and when you get used to those, when you get dependent on those, you're simply going to be raised the price, right? You're going to be asked for more and more, and, well, you're going to have to, you know, do everything possible in order to gain the money, and, well, as you gain the money, well, buy even more, right? So now you will have to, I don't know, get a few shots probably, most likely even some more, and probably get shots, you know, like one after another, you know, for your whole life maybe, right? Because ultimately these celebrities also don't realize one thing, right? They're just like bricks in a wall, right? Nothing is special about them. They just signed a deal and now they have all the money apparently in the world, because what they get through that deal is, you know, just loaned money. They can't leave because all that money is not theirs. No one tells them most likely that that money isn't theirs, right? Why do you see so many of the starlets, right? Twerking in clubs, in nightclubs, you know, why are there so many paparazzi catching them off guard, right? You know, doing so many things, right? Like even the, well, I'm not gonna dive into examples, but, you know, you shouldn't feel awkward when you see some of these starlets, you know, into prostitution and such, because, well, they have to get that money back somehow, right? Because these people who are feeding the stars, right, they don't care about the money they're giving them. They're giving these stars several $1 million. What's a few $1 million, right? They're worse than banks, right? Because out of those few $1 million, they'll be getting billions of dollars through the concerts that, you know, people will attend, right? And those ultimately are nothing else than, you know, drainage batteries, right? Power batteries for the cores of this matrix, right? Because through the unconscious emotion and, you know, thoughts and energy that people are putting out in such concerts, you know, this matrix is farming as much as it can, but, you know, process after process, they're all failing, right? It's just like the Windows that's no longer having enough resources, right? There's gonna be that moment. It's been that moment when it, you know, reached a critical failure. There are still many people to support it, but ultimately it's gonna fail entirely, right? The so-called 5D Earth is here, and people have a choice. They can still die for the Matrix, or they can live for the 5D, because the 3D Earth doesn't have much life about it, right? It's all about control, and if you live life as a slave and as a drone that has no feelings, no emotion, no meaning to it, what's the point of living life? You're just gonna be like a battery, right? The battery ultimately, it's an inanimate object. No one cares about that, but, you know, you're a live being, right? Or at least you should be a live being. So the point is, well, if you're gonna be farmed entirely, well, that's the problem. You're gonna die early, you're gonna die sick, and, well, in horrible ways most likely. And you also, if you have signed a contract, you know, you can't do much because you have signed a deal, right? And this generation has lost a lot of, you know, starlets, right? A lot of young artists. They had a lot of talent, but there was no one there to tell them not to sign the deal, right? So ultimately what this society is doing, it's blackmailing you, right? Just like drug dealers do. They see you're dependent on those drugs and they give you more, right? But on greater prices. Initially they give you a lot, and then they give you less and less and for greater prices, because ultimately they need to get their money back, and, you know, it's gonna be hard after a certain time to, you know, not give in, let's say. So these starlets are doing the same thing. They're drugging you with their dumb music, they're dumbing you down, they're keeping you in your, you know, lower instincts, right? And once you see things superficially, you're also gonna end up having an impression that, you know, that's the whole world, right? There's nothing beyond that. And, well, there's gonna be that little longing, but who the heck listens to their inner voices, especially when they've lost their humanity, right? When you lose yourself to such drugs, right? You're no longer feeling that much humane, you're no longer caring that much emotionally about others, right? All you want is more of that drug. So now you're gonna have to do as society will imply, right? In case you want more of your drugs, right? Because, well, ultimately, if you want more of your drugs, well, you have to pay you know, higher and higher prices, right? So if you're wondering why these starlets of yours, the mainstream ones, aren't shining that bright anymore, is, well, you know, they're just doing other people's propagandas, right? Because ultimately they serve someone, right? They have you know, people who represent them. So the point is, you know, they are basically under the fist of someone. So, right, they can't do anything because, well, they've signed a deal. So all this being said, hopefully this has been introspective enough. I've been going on through this video for more than intended. So all this being said, hopefully you liked it, you are appreciated, take care of yourselves. Ferenc Power signing out.